Never stops.
We're just trying to reach all audiences.
And it's working.
Let me get the fancy chair. This one's like so stiff.
I just can't tell. As a host.
Everyone good?
We are
Thank you so
recording.
much for working through that. Appreciate that. Thank you, as always. And thank you all for bearing with the technology issues, and it's not a bad delay. Good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well. I'd like to start the work session for the Frisco Town Council. May I have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Mortensen,
Here.
Aronson, Burley, Held,
Here.
Incan,
Here.
Holenko, Scripsack, Adrian. Thank you. Please, Mr. Evans, mute yourself.
It's the phone. It's whoever got called in.
Those joining us online, we're having some technology issues. So if you can make sure you're muted, we appreciate that. Thank you. First up on the work session agenda this afternoon is our continued short-term rental overview and strategies conversation that was started on June 14th. And turn it over to Danelle and welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just pull up my presentation here. Okay, great. So as you know, this is a continuation of our short-term rental conversation from 2 weeks ago. Just in case anyone is joining us from the public who doesn't know who I am, I'm Danelle Cook, Housing Program Manager for the town of Frisco. So the discussion agenda follows the general order of my staff report. I'll just start with a brief introduction to recap what we discussed 2 weeks ago, kind of explain why we're talking about a license cap and defining different license types. And then I'll outline 3 different license cap options, talk about a couple of different license types, and conclude with our staff recommendation and some specific questions for council to respond to. We've got about 30 minutes scheduled for this and 9 slides, so I will move as quickly as possible, but feel free to interrupt me as I move along here. So 2 weeks ago at the work session, I threw a ton of stats at you, just so you could see the current state of short-term rentals in Frisco right now. I also discussed some potential strategies that could be utilized to further regulate STRs if you felt that was necessary. Overall, the feedback that we received from the members of council was an acknowledgement that Frisco does have a tourist-driven economy and a strong desire to achieve a balance between the visitors who are contributing dollars to our economy and the local community who keeps the economy running. Some of you felt that we're currently in balance. Some of you felt that we are not currently in balance, but in general, the general sentiment was to explore a license cap. So we were directed to come back to this work session today to just talk specifically about what that license cap would look like and defining different license types. So I'll take you through those 3 options now. Option 1 proposes a cap on the number of STR licenses that would be determined based on a specific percentage of the entire housing inventory. So 2 weeks ago, we had 724 STR licenses, which is equivalent to about 20% of our housing inventory. At that point, it was suggested that perhaps we should implement a 22% cap with just a little bit of room for growth. Since then, the word got out, right? There were a couple of articles in the paper. We did have somewhat of a rush of applications. We now have 749 STR licenses. So in 2 weeks, that number grew by about 25. That's up to 21% of our housing inventory. So this table that you're looking at on the screen here shows what the percentage cap would look like at 20%, 22, 25, and 30%. The column on the left represents the number of housing units that we have within the town boundaries. It starts at 3,200 because that is the number that the Summit County Assessors Database shows that we have. Their number does not include the parcels that contain multiple units. For example, the apartments next to the Moose Jaw, that's counted as one unit in the data that they've provided, although we know there are multiple units. It also excludes lockoffs. So in comparison, the census data estimates 3,600 residential units. And we do believe that is a more accurate count because we've estimated the total number of multi-family apartments that were excluded from the assessor's database as well as the lockoffs. And it does kind of get us to that 3,600. So you'll notice that the numbers on the chart go all the way up to 4,000. They should probably go up to about 4,200. That would be the maximum number of residential units that could be built with our current zoning in place. So we are working on a more accurate build out analysis so that we can determine the exact number of residential housing units within town boundaries. In the meantime, 3,600 is our most accurate assumption. The blue line on your screen here shows that a 20% cap would be equivalent to 720 STRs, 22% would be 792, 25% allows for 900 STR licenses, and 30% would allow for 1,080 STR licenses. So by using that percentage rather than determining a very specific number, it allows the quantity of short-term rental licenses to grow as newly constructed units are put on the market and added to our inventory. So that pretty much summarizes the first option. Does anyone have any questions about that one? Okay. Great. So option 2 is also a percentage. It's pretty much the same as the first option that we just discussed. The only difference is that we would subtract the number of deed restricted units from the total housing inventory before applying the percentage. So as an example on the screen here, if we start with 3,600 residential housing units, subtract 156 deed restricted units from that total, the resulting number is 3,444 market rate units. Then after subtracting the deed restricted units, we would apply the percentage cap. As an example here, we've used 22%, which would yield 758 short-term rental licenses. So similar to option 1, if new market rate units are built, the quantity of short-term rental licenses may increase. However, if new deed restricted units are built, like Granite Park, we have 22 units planned there, the number of licenses would not be affected at all. And if market rate units were converted to deed restricted units, then the number of STR licenses would actually decrease, or the number of allowable licenses would decrease. That's a quick summary of option 2. Any questions on option 2? Okay. Moving right along to option 3. The third option is a ratio. So during our last work session, Mayor Mortensen suggested that perhaps the maximum number of short-term rental licenses should be a ratio directly tied to the quantity of deed restricted units. And in simple mathematical terms, a ratio establishes a direct quantitative relationship between two numbers. So after reviewing the Airbnb report, I would like to credit them for making that relationship known. They did a really good job of showing that STRs do generate jobs. In fact, according to their numbers, every 2 STRs generate 1 job. I didn't use the quantity of STRs that they reported. I just used the quantity of jobs and our number of STRs. Because they reported double the amount of STRs than we actually have. But what they failed to mention is that those jobs require locals to work them. The jobs are typically low paying, and the locals working those jobs need housing. So there is indeed that direct quantitative relationship between STRs and workforce housing, and potentially a ratio would work in this situation. But determining which ratio will be the hardest part if you chose to go that route. Because we can't just say one job requires 1 local, which requires 1 workforce housing unit, right? We all know that people work multiple jobs and they're rooming with each other to make rent affordable. So looking at this chart here at the bottom of your screen, the resulting STR license quantities for various different ratios are shown here, from a 1-to-1 ratio to 1-to-7 ratio. Right now, the numbers that we have are closest to that 1-to-5 ratio, 156 deed restricted units and 780 STR licenses. Of course, we only have 747, so it's not exact, but that's what we're closest to. One important thing to remember with this option is that in 5 years, when we achieve our goal of doubling the number of deed restricted units that we have in town, the number of STR licenses would also increase according to that ratio, whatever was selected. So if we were to adopt that current 1-to-5 ratio, then the quantity of STR licenses could reach over 1,500. Just keep that in mind. And with that in mind, determining which ratio, again, is key, right? Any questions on the third option? Okay. So we'll kind of shift gears here and talk about defining different license types. And defining license types would really only be pertinent if town council feels that moving forward with a license cap is necessary. And in that case, we are proposing 2 different license types, exempt and non-exempt. And you can see on the screen here the definitions. So the exempt license applies to Frisco residents who occupy their home as a primary residence. And they're basically the person who only rents their home while they're on vacation, or maybe they're in a shared home situation where they occupy one room and short-term rent another room. So if someone in that situation could provide proof of primary residence, then they would qualify for that exempt license, and then the STR license cap would not apply to them. All other short-term rental licenses would be considered non-exempt and would be subject to that license cap. Just kind of allows some flexibility for the locals who are utilizing short-term rental licenses to increase affordability of their home. We believe there's around 40 of those licenses. Any questions about license types? Okay. So in my staff report, I did recommend before implementing a license cap, allowing staff some time to conduct stakeholder interviews and gather some more data. I made that recommendation just for a couple of reasons. First being, we know at least a couple of property owners who rent long-term, but then they use their short-term rental license in between the long-term tenants just to fill that financial void. And in that case, I haven't really talked about this yet, but 2 weeks ago, a use it or lose it policy was kind of thrown out on the table. If a cap were implemented, then potentially there would be a policy to say, if you don't use it, then you lose it and we give it to somebody else, right? So in that case, we don't know how many properties have an STR license just to use it in between long-term tenants, and we don't know how they would be impacted if they would potentially ask their long-term tenants to move out just so that they could start short-term renting full-time. We're not certain of the impact there. Another scenario that we're not certain of right now would be how it would impact the real estate market. There was some input from a realtor in Breckenridge saying that now that Breckenridge has capped STR licenses, they're seeing a different type of investor. Instead of a short-term rental investor, they're seeing cash buyers who are priced out of Aspen. They're looking to Summit. They just want to buy a second home to leave vacant when they're not here. So we saw 2 weeks ago that our housing inventory has 45% vacant second homes. We are uncertain how that number would be impacted by a license cap. So because of those concerns, we just think it might be valuable to do some more research before implementing the cap. That pretty much concludes my presentation here. We do have 4 questions for council to consider and respond to. The first question is, are you in favor of a license cap? The second is if you are in favor, which cap number? Third, if you are in favor of the license cap, are the two license types sufficient that we've outlined here? And the fourth question for you today is there any other data needed to make this decision?
You know. And quickly, for those joining us online, can you please make sure you're muted? We're having trouble at council chambers muting you from here, and we'd appreciate that. Someone is getting some background noise from someone at home. Thank you. Giselle, can I ask a clarifying question on this? Based on these questions, is that if we go along with your recommendation to give you more time to gather information, do you want answers to these to compute into that data gathering session? Or is that kind of the first question you'd like us to answers to follow staff recommendation at this time to give you more time to collect more information to come back to us to better answer these questions?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have input on all four questions, even if
Okay,
the decision is to delay the cap.
perfect. Great. That's what I just want to make sure we weren't go down this whole road and then for no good reasons.
Yeah,
Question, how much time do you want to collect more data and what are the odds you're going to get what you're looking for?
right. It would depend on what the data is. I think one of the main things we would like to do is conduct stakeholder interviews with local realtors, property managers, land title, just, you know, the local stakeholders that might be able to provide some of that impact, the insight into how this would impact the Frisco housing inventory. I think we could probably complete that, you know, maybe within a month or so. Do you have any input on that, Don?
I think probably a month is.
Coming back in August.
Mhm.
Yeah.
August, probably realistic for get that information.
I think so.
Other questions?
I mean, you had a 20 license jump from 2 weeks ago because of the news, so some of this information might not even be, I mean, we're gonna surpass 22% in the next month, so I mean, I think there is a little bit of a timing issue here, just in terms of relevancy of the data. And to me, it would be helpful to have the information you're proposing before even really weighing in on these four questions, to
Mm.
Hunter's point. So I think generally speaking, I mean, I could just rattle off my
Go-
answers to all
go for
four
it.
and
Why
we can
not?
keep
Yep.
this moving.
Yep.
Generally speaking, I'm interested in understanding more about license caps. I think that the information that you just described that you want to try and figure out is exactly what's on my mind as well. So I'm not prepared to answer which cap number. I do like the idea of somehow tying it to workforce housing. So I do kind of lean towards that ratio, option 3, but very loosely, I guess. It makes sense right now. 2 license types seems sufficient, but you just mentioned another possibility, which you articulated much better than I could, but it raises the question, does a 3rd license type need to be available? So that's kind of where I'm at this point.
Okay.
I mean, I'd like this
Yeah, okay.
information. Yeah.
Anybody else want to weigh in, thoughts, questions, or just rattle off how you're feeling as Jesse did? I think that
I've got a
approach is
couple.
great. Yeah, go for it. Rick.
Questions. So when it came to being able to break out the folks that made it a primary resident, first and foremost, to get the semantics out of the way. Primary residence is the same thing as saying owner occupied.
Yes, correct.
So then how did you gather that information? Is that part of the application? It's not a separate license type. So how did we deduce that?
Through the assessor's database showing who has a local mailing address here in Summit County, and then also through the STR database, it shows if it's owner occupied or not, when they fill out their STR license
So it is
application.
on the license.
Yep.
And then to follow that up, should we go forward, are the folks that are owner occupied going to have, would it be a renewal? It's cart before the horse, I understand that, but as far as, is it something folks are gonna have to reapply for a new license type at some point through this process or at renewal, that sort of thing?
Yeah. They would eventually have to provide proof of primary residency. Right now, it's just a box that they check, but
Sure.
we would like to see that proof. So there would be some sort of renewal process. We could make it at our regular April 30th date, or if you wanted to implement it sooner, we could do that too.
And then in the second accounting, we carved out the workforce housing, that deed restricted homes that are unavailable for short terms. In addition to that if I missed it, forgive me, is the owner occupied going to also get carved out of that overall accounting for the total number?
Oh, it wasn't proposed, but that's a good point. We could do that.
Just asking.
Hmm.
And then, so I support a cap, and I support a cap for quality of life of the citizens of the town of Frisco. I do not tie it back to workforce housing. If that has a secondary component there, awesome. But that's just where Rick's coming from.
Okay.
Which cap number? I think simple is where I'm at. So a flat percentage, but again, more information is going to be great when you guys noodle some more, data that we can get. And then of the two license types, I'm open to hearing more, but those two seem to hit, but I don't know what else is out there. So I'm open to hearing more. So these aren't like crushing concrete answers for you. As far as any other data I would need, it's I think the information you're bringing forward, whether it's 2 weeks old or 4 weeks old, I don't think it changes much for me personally.
Okay.
So as long as you guys can come up with the information to bring back to us, I think I'm good with. I don't have anything else to ask
Okay.
you for that.
Go ahead.
I kind of like, I guess, I like the idea of taking the option 2, taking out the deed restricted units in the count of inventory. And kind of working from that number of market rate inventory. We take out the deed restricted units, it kind of gives us a better idea of exactly how many units we're looking at. And I'm just curious, how do we know, like, so people, even if people apply for a license, like the 20-some jump from 2 weeks ago, how do we know, like, how much are people using the license? Is that weird to ask? Like, do we know? Because people might even like go for a license and maybe they don't even use it, or they use it once in a while. I don't.
No, it's a really good question, and I've been looking into that. And what the answer I've come up with is that we would have to pay the STR software vendor for a custom report that they would have to build into the software for us to find that number. I did find 200 properties that are not currently advertising, but then some of them are paying taxes. So there's not, we currently don't have a system in place to create an accurate number of STR licenses that are not actively renting. I wish I had that data for you today, but it would take the paid process route.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I like the, primary residence exemption idea. Yeah, I guess my only big, I don't know, you guys could talk about it, but I'm just curious, like, so all these people are applying for a license, but I'm just curious, like, how many people are using them and to what degree?
Okay.
Because that might, I don't know, because like 2 weeks ago, things had kind of plateaued and that felt really nice, But even just talking about it makes everyone panic and buy the license. And it's like, are they buying it just, like how people bought hand sanitizers,
Yeah.
No.
And the software vendor did give me a 6-week lead time on that report. So if that's something that council would like me to pursue,
Frisco limiting short-term rentals?
you're joining us online or via phone, can you make sure you're muted, please? We're having trouble with our technology in town hall today. Thank you.
I guess like, I guess I would need a little more time, like. Understanding option 2 and option 3, the ratio versus pulling out the deed restriction from the inventory, like. I guess I would need to do a little follow-up on my own.
Okay.
Just trying to figure out what is the major differences between those 2 options. Or maybe I could come talk to you about.
Yeah, absolutely. My office is open anytime.
So I'm not gonna say I am for or opposed to a license cap. Primarily because I just don't feel that I have the data that way as far as what is typical, what should be typical of a semi-resort town. In the country, how is that working out? As you know, I believe that when Airbnb first came online, the whole idea was the primary residence renting out your place, right? And subsidizing your rent. I do believe that that was the main purpose, right? And so now that we have 40 that are, that purpose, and 700, whatever the number is, as just straight up short-term rentals, I don't know where those numbers are supposed to lie. Where should they lie, right? Comparing it to workforce, I don't know if that is also as good, it's apples to oranges, partially because a lot of that housing stock is, I do believe, is not going to be workforce housing. It's otherwise going to be sitting empty, right? And so as we're seeing in Breckenridge, and so where in there are we supposed to be? I mean, I've read in Summit County that short-term rentals are encompass 30% of the housing stock in Summit County, right? And is that acceptable? It's way higher here than it is in any other county in Colorado, right? Aspen, Vale, anything else, we are blowing it out of the water. So it's, I assume, because we're at that mid-level where, people can actually afford to get in, although that's not the case anymore, in the last 2 years. I feel like we'd be completely shooting in the dark if we say, yes, a cap at 22%, like, what does 22% mean to the rest of the stock throughout, So I think some of that data is what are other resort towns seeing, like say in Florida, I mean, who knows, but just for Airbnb information about their numbers, I think that's just important to help us decide whether or not 22%, 30%, 50% of our housing stock should be acceptable as short-term rentals, right? I mean, I don't know that. It's all completely guessing there. And that's why I just have a hard time saying that I'm fully for a license cap, it doesn't mean I won't oppose a license cap if we get some more of this information and we say, that it's really to maintain a community. It's important to not go beyond whatever, or something like that, right? And I know that's pretty vague, but let me know if I should try to fill in what that, what would be missing there, but this is your wheelhouse and I, will lean on you for this. So that comes down to also, the ratio or the percentage. I don't have an educated guess there at this point for what it should be, right?
And you're looking for more data.
I am looking.
All right, that's what I'm getting.
All right, appreciate it. I'm good then.
Cool.
I'll be on.
Yeah.
So thanks for keeping on it. We're very happy to have you here. So STR license cap, yes or no? Yes. If yes, what's the cap number? And I don't think we'll ever get to, this is the right number. What we're going to get to is where we are now is okay. And where Breckenridge is too much. So let's put something in place before we get to too much. I respect the need and the desire for community outreach to create more data. I think for the most part, it's probably predictable what we're going to hear because this conversation's been going on in every resort town everywhere for the last couple of years. So there are those who will be on the economic side saying we need more, and those who are on the community neighborly, I don't want one next to me side who are going to say less. And it's going to be our job to figure out where that number is and respect the fact that if we missed it, we may have to go back and revisit it. But, you know, sure, go get more data. And I hope we unearth something that other communities haven't found, but I do believe this has been a very well researched concept on an individual town basis. And, you know, it's, so I want people to weigh in, but I'm going to be surprised if we're surprised. And detail-y thing, exempt versus non-exempt, I don't think one of them has to be a standard, meaning we have a standard STR license. And then there is an exemption for certain people, as opposed to using the same word in opposite directions. It's confusing. And I see no problem having if we go down the path of use it or lose it, I don't have a problem with somebody showing us that they are a long-term landlord as their method of using that. That's could be an exemption. You know, we want to encourage long-term landlords. I don't want to do anything that dissuades them from continuing in that role. So whatever we can do to allow them to be long-term landlords. And if there's a vacant period, sure, STR it, we're not going to get in the way. I think that, oh, and by the way, I use the term reasonable. What is the cap number? It's going to be some reasonable number that we're all going to wrestle with and figure out.
I do-
Just back up, sorry. Stakeholder interviews, very important for sure. We need to hear from the public before we go making this decision. And use it or lose it. That was a good way to put it. You know, if we implemented a use it or lose it, the people who are not using it typically will probably be long-term renters. You know, so that would be an issue.
That counts as using it. It would be my view.
Yeah.
I guess like I'm kind of wondering who exactly fits into that stakeholder category, you know? I don't know who else to include in that, you know, is it business owners? I don't know how to hear from, like, are we trying to hear from everybody or just people interested in buying property or managing property management? Realtors, like, I don't know, like, who else do we include in that? I don't know.
Yeah, suggestion we had talked about including business owners in the stakeholder outreach. I failed to mention it, but thank you for reminding me of that. And I think there are probably other types of stakeholders as well that we should include.
And I think in those conversations, you'll find others that might be missed just through suggestions or.
So I know Lisa hasn't gone, but I do just want to point out that CAS did release an STR ordinance matrix that does talk about the number of licenses per residential unit. So it ranges on the high end in Breck 56% down to like 2%, depending on, you know, a county or a resort. So some of this information is out there. And I'm sure you have this matrix. And if you don't, I'm happy to send it your way.
Did it in my report
Yeah.
2 weeks
Perfect.
ago.
Oh, okay, perfect.
And we did have a whole slide on that, but yeah.
To your point, Andy, it's, you know, it's a really good snapshot in comparison right here, of what you're asking. Now, what's right? is
If I may
story. Yeah.
finish one thought that I forgot to make. No. I just didn't raise you had about options 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 seem to take us to the same place. It's just a different calculation as to how are we doing our math. But in the end, we're going to end up at a relatively similar place. number 3, you use the term mathematics.
Hmm.
Math is when you add numbers. Mathematics is when you include letters in the calculation, and I don't like mathematics. So item 3 is very confusing to me, and I think that would lead to more confusion for the community. And I don't necessarily, to Rick's point, I don't tie the short-term rental cap to a solution to workforce housing. It's more of a community, neighborhood, culture solution. So option 3 is just too confusing for
Okay.
me to think it's the right thing to do at this time to solve the problem we're talking about. Sorry, Lisa.
Hopefully gonna remember everything. So first of all, yes, I am in favor of a cap. I was leaning toward 2 and taking out workforce housing. I don't know that there is, to your point. I just think we need enough workforce to support the number of visitors that we have.
Mhm.
So that's more my concern. I am curious about I also liked just expanding the exemption category to include the people who are long-term and short-terming in between. But I would like to know how we know when we say, mostly owner occupied, how do we know that? How do we monitor that?
So we would have them submit proof of primary residence, which would be, we've kind of talked about it a little bit, and we're kind of thinking would be your federal tax filing and wherever you're filing taxes, that the address of the Frisco unit would have to be on your federal tax filing.
Okay. The 2 different licenses, again, back to the exemptions, if that included those long-term who were short-terming in between.
Mhm.
Is sufficient. Deciding all of this.
Yeah, and any other,
Yeah, I think we're all in a good spot and in pretty much the same spot, it sounds like. So yeah, please go forth and get more data. And I will weigh in that I do think we need a cap, and I'm happy just to give you that time to make sure we get it right. I do know option 3 that you laid out with the ratio. I still wish we could find a way to tie these 2 together, but I think the math worked in a way that proved that it could have, I think, almost more negative effects in the long term of a community feel potentially. So I'm very less inclined to that now than I was when I brought it up earlier. So appreciate you pointing that out.
okay,
Yeah.
Think that, you said you had spoken to somebody in Breckenridge about how it's kind of gotten a little out of control for them, too high of a percentage. And I just wonder if there are other community leaders that could be talked to in other communities. that
yeah.
have Different.
The
percentages.
meeting on, I want to say it's July 11th with Breckenridge, Silverthorne, and Summit County to talk specifically about short-term rentals and what the individual councils and county commissioners are thinking and how they want to move forward in their municipalities. So that would provide some insight in that way.
What else are we doing? I think the option 2, I think we kind of have to, because I don't think counting a deed restricted unit in the total unit, they can't ever have a short-term rental license. So they don't actually qualify. So they shouldn't be counted into that number by the nature of what that is. So I think that's almost inherent in the way we do our math for me. So I'm in full support of kind of going that route. I do like potentially, I think Jessie maybe said it maybe under her breath, that possibly we have that 3rd rental license type, which is that long-term rented unit that in between long-term contracts, if they need to, they have the option. And I almost think carving that out as a 3rd type, well, maybe unfortunately owners on staff could also start to grow that database that we've all wished we've known, which is how many long-term rental units do we have in our community? Because that's a missing number that there's no easy way to find. And maybe we could start to get some of that and extrapolate out a realistic potential number. And maybe that's the way we can go that path. I don't know, but I think including them in there in one way or another is important. And I'm still a huge fan of the use it or lose it. I think if you don't submit, you know, a certain number of nights in tax revenue in a year, I don't want to create a speculative market on a short-term rental license. The whole point of having them is so that when someone is coming here to be a visitor, they contribute to our economy. So if they are speculative in owning one just in case, they're not doing what the short-term rental license, kind of why we need short-term rentals is because we are tourist based. We need people coming to stay here. We know that they want to be in a short-term rental. If we have people who have license who aren't using it, it's defeating the purpose of having a cap to begin with, because then again, we just have more empty vacant homes, which is our bigger problem. So I think finding a way to make some sort of realistic in the non-exempt license category, you know, if you don't use it or don't submit X amount of days of taxes, then your license is revoked and it's opened up to the next one on the wait list. I'd still like to see that.
What would your definition of using it be?
I mean, for me, I think like 14 days or
14
know,
days a year?
something like that, or yeah, at a minimum or something. I don't know. Cause that, you know, the people who are still living in Denver, using their house on a fairly regular basis, but also short-term renting. I don't know. And I think that would be another thing. I think that's more incumbent on us to come up with that than you all. Cause I think that's just a number that's not quantifiable in a way that, and that's something in your data or your, and you know, and maybe if you work with some of the short-term rental management companies in your conversations, they might have a good idea, you know, average use for second homes from the Front Range.
I think that's really important. That's a great data point that you can get from our stakeholders of tell us what a minimum usage
Should be. Yep.
to make it worth having a short-term rental.
And yeah, I think otherwise, unless anybody else has anything else, or you had any clarifying questions, any view on what you've heard or the direction?
So the direction I'm hearing is to come back in August with more detailed information after conducting stakeholder interviews and gathering more data. The report that would show who's using it would take about 6 weeks. We could go ahead and get started on it now. But I don't know if it would be, we could try and time that so I can come back with that data if that's what you're asking for.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
think, and yeah, you know, you and Don and I can work out
Mhm.
what agenda to bring that back to council is the
Okay.
right time. But yeah, because I think it's more important we get the right data than rush the data or rush your efforts. And then I just know, because I'm going to hear it probably before we even leave here through social media and otherwise, like we know what the workforce is saying. That's why we're here. And they are a herd member of the kind of shareholder group or stakeholders, in my opinion. I know how most people who have lost a lease, lost their house because it went on the market feel. I think that group has been heard and we are representing them, in my opinion. I don't think we're leaving them out unfairly in that. The conversations you're having, we're making sure we're talking to everybody. So I appreciate that.
I think I think, I don't know if I haven't made tallies, but I think we're all sort of in the yes cap.
Yep.
So I'd encourage when you come back to have a number. Give us the starting point of what you recommend as the cap.
Okay.
Great. That was my tally.
More than 4.
I got an answer from Elizabeth on the cap. Everyone else, well,
And you don't have to right now. We're coming back. We have a majority on the cap, so it's coming.
Yeah.
We got a majority.
Yep.
okay. But yeah, the majority did say yes, so I will come back with a recommended number.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for your feedback. I
Yep.
appreciate it.
And again, thanks for all the work on this. So. Yep. And those who sat in from the public, now you know who you can reach out to. So thank you for being here as well for that. Next up on this afternoon's work session is agenda item number 2, and this is our annual auditor presentation.
That's the auditor, yeah.
Are they not here yet? Sorry, I thought I saw them come in. They might be sitting in the,
Why is everybody leaving when we're having the auditor
I know, the
conversation?
good part's about to happen. They are here. Yes, oh, that's okay. I was gonna say, I thought I saw them all walk in, so we're good.
Yes. Ready? I can do that for you. It's on there? Yeah.
I'll go grab. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I want to make sure they've got the grass this second.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Guaranteed way to make it happen.
I'm sorry, Leslie texted me to grab something and I did not have my phone on me.
All right.
She'll be right
And
back.
then there was a confusion because I saw you guys hanging out out there and she's like, they're not here yet. I'm like, they look cozy enough out there in the auditorium. This is the riveting part, so sit back and hold on. You, oh yeah, I mean, look, you got paperwork for this particular section.
Send out the email today of all the different towns revenue.
And I was sitting down here without.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Whatever. 11 million.
One more piece of paper for everybody, this is our letter on governance from the audience.
Once I learned how,
You
once I
taking this
learn
away or
how
is
to work
Leslie,
this, I will
Leslie taking this one away?
start talking.
All right.
All right. Perfect. Thank you for having me, and us, the finance department, along with our auditor, Michael Jenkins from McMahon and Associates. We're required by state statute every year to go through an audit and have them issue an opinion on our financial reporting and the rules set forth by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. Mike will give you that opinion when I'm through here. I'll go over briefly our financial statements with you guys and then turn it over to him to give you the audit results. I ask that you please, if you have any questions, wait till we're done and we can answer them for you then. I'd first like to thank McMahon and Associates for doing our audit every year and providing the expertise and meticulousness of reviewing our financial statements. They're always available year round for us to call if we have any questions or ask their opinions on what we should do to make sure everything is in compliance with the laws of the state as well as the government, make sure we're doing everything right. We submit this financials or this annual comprehensive financial report to the GFOA, that's the Governmental Financial Officers Association, in hopes we receive an award every year. It's a prestigious award given out to all governments that meet their requirements of standards and transparency on disclosure of our financials. So
Dylan, can I interrupt you on that and
Yep.
just remind everyone, if you have, especially on council, if you've not seen the wall between Dylan and Leslie's office, we have an extensive collection of receiving those awards for having exceptional finance standards. And it's something to be proud of. And I think we should. And so thank you for being a part of that. And Leslie, we're looking forward to continuing it on.
no problem. I am Dylan Olchin. I'm the accountant for the town. I put together these financials with Leslie's help every year, and I run through the audit with Billy Lewis, associate of McMahon and Associates. She is a tremendous help. Even though she's not here today, I would like to thank her for all she does. With that, I will get into the financials with you guys. In regards to our environmental policy on trying to be stewards, I did not print out our financial book for all of you. It's 130 pages long. I encourage you to all read it or look it over. We're going to post it on our website tomorrow, but I did print out a few various pages of this financial report. I'll go over with you guys and explain things as we go through there. The first part of our financials are our government-wide financials. That's combining all of our governmental funds along with our enterprise funds, the Marina and the Water Fund. They're all grouped together, and the statement of net position. This is kind of like a balance sheet for the public sector, but it's not called a balance sheet because we're a governmental entity, and it's just laid out a little differently. But in that first statement of net position, you can see that our assets, total town assets with everything, exceeded liabilities by $98 million. Of that $98 million, $50.2 million of it is invested in capital assets. And then there's some restrictions placed on other parts of that, $10 million restricted. $8 million of that is for our affordable housing. There's a $1 million economic development restriction. Tabor, set out by state legislation, requires us to hold 3% of our income for emergencies only. We cannot spend that. If we do, it has to be replaced the next year. So that's $700,000. That leaves us with about $37.6 million of available funds for our ongoing operations as the town. Total assets of the town were $108.9 million. The difference between that and the $98 million is just accounts payable, stuff like that, that we have outstanding at year end. Of that $108 million in assets, $41 million of it is in cash and investments, and $58 million of it is tied up in capital assets. The rest of it is kind of inventories and receivables we're going to get in the upcoming year. The next page of our governmental wide statements is our statement of activities. This is page C2 on that handout I gave you guys. This is kind of like the profit and loss of the government. Everything's combined, Marina and Water Fund, along with our general fund and all of our other governmental funds. It's just laid out a little differently than a normal profit and loss. It's showing all of our expenses and revenues by department and or by program function. It separates out the enterprise funds, and then it shows our general government revenues, taxes and whatnot at the bottom that allocate to that $98 million. The statement of activities shows that the total town's net position in 2021 increased by $7.2 million over the previous year. The governmental activities net position grew at $6.8 million, and our business type activities, the Marina and Water Fund, grew $400,000. Of all that revenue we take in, it's primarily comprised of sales and use tax. That totals 51% of our total revenues. That increased $1.7 million or 15% over 2020. So there was a lot more people in town spending money, paying taxes this last year. And our real estate investment fee revenues, that represents 10% of the total town revenue. That increased 34% over 2022. That's just because of prices are skyrocketing in this town. Governmental funds are broken out between major funds and non-major funds. Major funds of the governmental funds that have more than 10% revenues or expenses of the total governmental funds are classified as major funds, and that classification just makes sure there's more emphasis placed on those funds, and the reader can see them more in detail rather than being grouped together with our non-major funds. The non-major funds are our Conservation Trust Fund, Historic Preservation Fund, our Insurance Reserve, Lodging Tax, Nicotine, and our Open Space. The enterprise funds, those are the closest related funds to the private sector. They're not funded by taxes at all. They are user fees driven. So all of the fees paid to that enterprise fund can only be used to maintain operations of that enterprise fund. Everything's split out in our financials. The next thing I'll go over with you guys is our governmental funds. I'm sorry, didn't hit the forward on the last one. This kind of shows the breakdown of our funds. The next pages of the financial statements, C3 through C6, are our governmental funds, and I'll just kind of hit on the highlights of each of those funds and what happened this last year. The aggregate increase of all governmental funds, those include our non-major as well as major funds, that increased $7.4 million in the aggregate of 2021. The general fund actually declined by $8.7 million, and that's because of the transfer we make into the capital improvement fund at the end of the year. We take all excess funds from our governmental fund and put that into the capital projects fund for projects around the town. There is a 7-month reserve placed on the general fund for operations in case of emergencies. That's set forth by council. Anything over that 7-month reserve is transferred in. So that kind of shows why there was a $8.7 million decrease. The SCHA fund is funded by Summit County Housing Authority tax, and that went up $1.4 million this last year. The Capital Improvement Fund increased by $14.3 million. That's primarily of that $13.8 million we transferred from the general fund into the capital improvements projects. That's kind of already been decided what that money is going to be spent on by you guys in our last budget session. The other increase in that fund was primarily due to the real estate investment fees that we take in, and that all goes to the capital improvement fund. Collectively, all the non-major governmental funds increased by $400,000 this last year. Going more into specifics for our general fund, you can see that revenues on our final budget were $4.3 million. We took in a lot more taxes this last year through tourism and town being busy. That resulted in a $3.1 million increase of what we had budgeted. Expenditures in the general fund were less than budgeted. That's primarily due to COVID impacts on special events and the adventure park. We weren't fully staffed. We weren't fully operational over the entire year. So we did save $1.3 million in expenditures. That gave us a net change of $4.4 million in the positive for our general fund this last year. Next up is our Summit County Housing Authority 5A fund. Those revenues, taxes again were higher, came in $500,000 than higher. Expenditures were $4.4 million better than budgeted. That's primarily due to capital projects we did not complete this last year and put off during to COVID related and just not having everything completed on time. The next major fund in the government funds is our capital improvement fund. Again, this is primarily funded through real estate investment fees and the transfer of excess capital from the general fund. Revenues exceeded budget by $1.3 million. That was primarily due to real estate investment fees coming in at an all-time high this last year. And 2022 is looking almost the exact same. It's coming in higher, though we did budget a lot higher this year for that. Expenditures came in $2 million below budget. That's probably mainly due to just capital projects being delayed or the timing of them being completed. There was a $13.4 million budget into the capital improvement fund this last year. So that's just showing we took in a lot more taxes than we thought we did. Charges for services are up in the government, and hopefully we'll have just as big as a transfer this year. What is next? That takes us to our enterprise funds, our water and marina. Briefly, I can go over revenues and expenses with those. The water fund, we knew what we were going to be charging our constituents, so the revenues came in as expected. There was expenses for the water, the building out there that those capital expenditures were delayed and the project's just not finished on time. That saved us $900,000, which increased the fund balance by that much as well. The Marina Fund is our next fund. Revenues did come in slightly higher, $100,000 more than expected. Expenses were a little less than budgeted, but that again is due to just the completion of the projects out at the marina not being complete. And staff just being short-staffed at the marina last year, we saved a lot of money and expenditures there. This slide shows the amount of revenue we take in as a town and how we take it in. 80% of our revenues we take in come from taxes. Charges for service is at 11%. Intergovernmental funding comes in at 4%, and permits and licensing at 3%. You can look at those. They're pretty comparable to 2020. I would say the only differences are in taxes. We took in a lot more money. Charges for services are a little less than the year before. That's probably because, again, we were short-staffed out at the marina, the adventure park, and operations were just cut a little shorter than they were in the previous year. You can see here, our expenditures are pretty spread out evenly throughout the town between capital outlay, community development, culture and recreation. Our biggest expense is just general government, and that's probably more salaries than anything. This slide shows our fund balances over the last 4 years and how they've fluctuated. You can see in 2020, our general fund balance was extremely high. That's because we did not transfer money into the capital improvements fund in 2020 because of COVID precautions. We actually transferred money out of the capital improvement fund to the general fund, just have that money in case of pandemic expenses that we didn't know of. You can see in 2021 that the general fund balance drops severely again, and the capital improvements fund is way higher than previous years. That's mainly because a lot of projects were delayed in the previous years that will be completed in the upcoming years. So you can see off to the side that capital improvement fund is about $17.5 million at the end of 2021, but most of that has all been decided upon and is going to Slopeside Hall. All right. Before I turn it over to Mike, I wanted to turn you back to the handout I gave you guys of page C3. And you can see at the top of that page, we have roughly, let me reference it here. We have roughly $38 million in assets, but I did want to go over that amount of money we have and how it is tied up in various restrictions placed on us through state or ourselves. You can see that at the bottom. Fund balances as non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. Our non-spendable balances are our inventories for the VIC, FAP, our fuel that we resell to town departments and Summit County Fire Authority and Frisco Sanitation. The restricted money, you can see that Tabor Reserve, that is $709,000. That is set up by state legislation. We have to keep that money for emergencies, and it can only be spent in emergencies. Summit County Housing Authority is voter approved. That $8 million can only be spent on housing projects. There's $140,000 in the capital improvement fund. That's restricted for our debt service, for the debt we have with the town, and the non-major funds. That restricted cash consists of our nicotine taxes, conservation trust taxes, or not conservation trust funds, excuse me, and our lodging taxes that can only be spent on restrictions legislatively. The committed balance, that has the restrictions placed on ourselves by you guys, town council. That $17 million is restricted on capital projects you've already decided about. $224,000 of that is insurance reserve funds and some of the other non-major governmental funds. The assigned fund balance of the general fund. That's money coming into us from employee down payment assistance reimbursements to us, and the highway user taxes coming in from the state at year end. That leaves us with an unassigned fund balance of $7.6 million. That's basically the 7-month restriction we've placed on ourselves for general fund balances that we have to keep. But that money is available to be spent, that you guys can spend. So really, at the end of the year, the money we are allowed to spend is the unassigned, or you can change the capital improvement funds allocation of how you want to spend that money. Next sheet of paper I wanted to highlight from the audit is page C7. This is kind of the balance sheet of our enterprise funds, the water and the marina fund. What I wanted to highlight there, you can see at the very bottom of that page, net position. The net position, a net investment in capital assets that are just assets, we cannot spend that money. There's unrestricted funds, but of those funds, we did place a 4-month emergency reserve on both of those funds set by council. So of that $800,000 in the marina, $400,000 of it is reserved. So I wanted to highlight to you guys, we only have $400,000 in the marina fund, and that's not a lot of money. I know budgeting season is coming up, and I just wanted to let you all know that as much money we think we have, a lot of that is tied up and restrictions placed on us by state legislation, voter approved laws, or restrictions we placed on ourselves. With that, I want to say the town is in good financial health. We have enough money to function going into next year. I see our revenues coming in higher this year than budgeted, which is great. And with that, I will turn it over to Michael to let you to give his opinion on how our audit went this last year.
Thanks so much, Dylan. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet with you this evening, to discuss the results of our audit of the Town of Frisco's 2021 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Used to have a shorter acronym, but now the acronym is kind of unpronounceable. In any event, I'd like to start out by really expressing our gratitude to Dylan and Leslie and all their staff for all the hard work they put into producing this. One thing that Dylan didn't say is that this goes above and beyond what the town is required to produce for financial reporting. So I think that sort of commitment by the town really shows how much these folks are committed to really delivering great service to the taxpayers and the other constituents of the town. And I think that's something that they should be credited for. And that over and above that, they've also, as Dylan indicated, they've submitted the reports annually, not just the annual report, but also the budget report and the popular financial report to the GFOA. And they've received commendations on all of that. So again, just a solid job by the finance crew. So, as Dylan mentioned, the audit is a statutory requirement, but above and beyond that, there's good business reasons for doing an audit. And yes, I'm obviously biased in my opinion of that, but because it does really provide an independent outside viewpoint on the town's financial reporting. As I mentioned, it's the town's role and their job to put together the financial report. It's our job as your independent auditors to come in and evaluate that financial reporting and the compliance of those reports with the applicable governmental reporting standards, and basically ensure that they're properly presented and measured. For us to issue our opinion, our staff was on site for the better part of a week here in the town, just visiting with the various departments to make sure we understood and how the numbers and how the town's operations basically resulted in the numbers that end up in those financial reports. Beyond that, we also do the typical auditor things of ticking and tying and making sure that the balances tie out and are appropriately reported, and just looking at the overall business operations of the town. Following the on-site portion of the work, we also worked with Dylan and Leslie and the crew, just tying up the loose ends, ensuring the draft was completed and together. So I am pleased to let you know that the town did receive a unmodified or clean audit opinion for 2021, which is the highest level of assurance that we as independent auditors can provide on financial statements. And included in the report is a copy of the town's Certificate of Excellence of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 2020 ACFR. I told you it was a kind of an awkward acronym. And the town is again submitting its report for 2021 for certificate evaluation. So again, submitting it to that extra level of scrutiny, again, to provide the citizens of the town with that higher level of assurance that the town is in good financial hands. I'm not sure actually how many years the town's got this thing, but it's quite the record and quite the achievement. So good work. Dylan went through and really gave great detail of the financial results for the year. I just wanted to kind of hit a couple of highlights here, emphasize a couple of things. Looking at that, Dylan talked about the government-wide financial statements. That's kind of comparable to your for-profit financial statements. Everything's in there, the debt, the capital assets, everything. And just a couple of takeaways I wanted to highlight in there. The town is and remains highly liquid. There's substantial cash holdings at the end of the year. It was $41.1 million in cash investments at the end of the year, and that was up about $5 million from the prior year. It's also continues to be a pretty significant component of the total assets of the town. The town also has a really strong asset base. There's, I'd say, $58.9 million of capital assets, which was up about $2.3 million in the past year on a net basis. That's net of depreciation. You can see there a list of some of the more significant of the additions that were made during the year, including about $3.2 million of improvements made to the marina facilities during the past year. And just that represents the town's commitment and investment in infrastructures and facilities that provide services to the public. There's no new debt issued during 2021. In fact, the town actually reduced its, paid off one of the COP issues and continued with the repayment on schedule on the other debt items that are outstanding. The town also really has I think Dylan emphasizes, a solid equity position. Their assets were in excess of the liabilities by about $98 million at the end of the year. Obviously, with that investment in infrastructure and capital properties, that's a significant portion of that, but there's also about $37.7 million of it that's unrestricted and available for use in the 2022 fiscal year. Those things taken together really combine to provide a good base, a good financial base for the town for the future, and it provides provides flexibility in terms of its operations. Looking at the government-wide P&L, the statement of activities, both the governmental and the business type activities enjoyed a increase in net position for the 2021 fiscal year, aggregating to some $7.2 million. That presentation, as Dylan mentioned earlier, is a little bit different when you look at what financial statements and P&Ls look like in a typical scenario. But the presentation does really prove out the town's dependence on general type revenues, in that 25% of the costs of governmental activities are covered by only 25% of the cost of the governmental activities is covered by direct revenues. The remaining 75% is coming from those general revenues, sales tax, property taxes, real estate investment fees. And, you know, again, as Dylan mentioned, both the real estate investment fees and sales and use taxes both saw a continuation of that upward trend that was seen in actually from 2019 onwards. So as the resort economy has kind of returned to more normal levels. On the fund level, so that's the budget basis reporting that you're used to seeing on a more regular basis in terms of how are we doing relative to expectations for the year. In aggregate, positive increases across all governmental funds. Although there were, you know, as Dylan mentioned, that significant transfer from the general fund to the capital improvement fund was pretty much a catch up of what hadn't been transferred in 2020, as the town kind of wisely kept some reserves in place just in case they were needed in the 2021 fiscal year. One of the ways that we can look at the governmental fund balances and kind of measure fiscal strength is to look at fund balances as a percentage of current year expenditures. And you can see there that all of those governmental funds report really strong percentages. And that kind of shows that two things. One is, it's a good financial position, but it's also a necessary one because of, as I said earlier, that reliance on some variable revenue sources, that sales and use tax and real estate investment fees, because those are not fixed and stated revenue sources along the same lines as property taxes. The town needs to continue to keep significant reserves in place. Also worth noting that you'll see that some of those numbers are quite large as percentages, and I think we need to keep in mind that they're driven to a large extent by those two funds, the SCHA fund and the capital improvement fund, which are really capital type funds in that they grow and accumulate funds to actually fund the projects that then draw down the balances. So you tend to have this aggregation and then the drop down. So you'll see that those numbers really aren't a typo. It's really something that is appropriate and consistent with the intention of those funds. So just kind of wrapping up, the overall financial health really quite solid, quite good at the end of the year. Strong fund balances. Both of the enterprise funds had positive results last year. Sales tax and real estate investment fees were up again last year as the economy started showing signs of life again. All of the funds were within their approved budgets. So again, good conservative budgeting and good conservative operations. And then, you know, as I said before, that those positive financial results really puts the town in a good financial position entering into 2022, especially, you know, the current kind of economic uncertainty that we're in right now. I think that the town is well positioned to deal with that. The packet you have also includes our governance letter that we're required to produce as part of our audit, and addresses, I guess, the non-numeric part of the audit and talks about the town's choice of accounting policies, their practices, the audit process itself. The audit And, just to kind of cut to the chase there, audit process, super smooth. These guys do a great job. Couldn't ask for better. Really appreciate it. So smooth, and, all the departments really very forthcoming in terms of working with us, explaining kind of how they do what they do and how well they do it. On the accounting side, the accounting policies, conservative, consistent, and compliant. It's like 3 A's. So thank you very much for the time. Thank you again, Dylan. Good job again. Thank you, Leslie. And are there any questions?
Questions for Michael or staff? Either the audit or the budget report.
I just want to say I really enjoy the audit every year. This is probably the biggest document I help produce. It's just numbers to most people, but I look at the auditors coming in as just another set of eyes and double checking our work, reassuring us and council that we're doing everything correctly and accurately, and that award we submit every year and get is a nice pat on the back for ourselves. So rest assured, your money's in safe hands.
This is Dylan's Super Bowl.
All except for this talking.
Appreciate it so much. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Mall Plaza discussion. Speaking of throwing good money after bad, Mr. Goebel, how are you?
Council.
Now he knows we have a lot.
Oh, no. You know me, I try to be frugal.
I know. That's
That's
why I can joke.
Before you tonight we'd like to have a discussion with council about the front yard of town hall, if you will. Every year we budget sums of money to kind of make the concrete better, fix some problems out there. We've even gone out to bid, I think, 4 or 5 times in my tenure to tear that clock tower down, but then we don't know what to do once we do that. So Public Works would like to have a discussion with you on looking at this as a bigger picture instead of just piecemealing it. It is town hall. It is the government seat here in Frisco, and it really hasn't had a lot of work done to it, except with the exception, of course, of the PD remodel, which is going very well, by the way. Everything is right on. I think Chief would agree with me on that one. All right, good. Got a thumbs up. Good. So we'd like to talk to you about your thoughts on looking at it as a bigger picture and seeing what we can do with town hall. There's been discussions in the past about creating more office space out here in the atrium, and those just kind of faded away. A lot of this faded away during COVID, and we just weren't knowing what was going on. So, before you tonight, I in my memo, I won't go through the whole thing, but Public Works came up with a few options for you that we'd like to discuss with you and see what you think about it. Option 1 is maintain the status quo, do nothing, and continue to budget to replace concrete and stuff as needed outside. Option 2 is to prepare an RFP for a redesign of just the plaza area. And when I say the plaza area, it's the whole basically flat work out front here and then the area around the clock tower out there. Do a redesign of that, utilizing the $26,400 that you budgeted in the 2022 budget for concrete replacement. We think we could get a good design of just that for around $26,000. Option 3 would be to prepare an RFP for a redesign of the plaza, the atrium, and all of that out in the front yard, if you will. For this, council would need to move the $100,000 for the atrium design that we have budgeted for next year in the capital improvement budget, and the $20,000 that we put in every year for the concrete replacement, for a total of $140,000 to go out to RFP and do a design on the entire front facade of this building.
one of the other issues we're having is the atrium glass on the roof portion of the glass is starting to crack. And we've gotten some bids in the past for that. It's double panel, so it's not leaking anything, but eventually it's going to become a safety issue and it's going to become very expensive to fix in a hurry if we need to. So the snow load on it, I don't know that it was ever really a good idea to have a glass roof on this building. But it is what it is. That's what we have. So we've gotten bids in the past to replace just that one panel of glass, and it's around $15,000 to $20,000 just for that one panel of glass. So we come before you tonight to get your thoughts and get your ideas on what you'd like to see. And then of course, option 4 is any ideas that you may have for what we need to do out there. We've got dying trees, we've got water intensive lawn out there. We've got a lot of things out there that really we could, if we do it right, we could take the time to make it right and make town hall and at least the front of it look good, and then possibly even expand our office space that we really need without expanding the footprint of the building, which, I mean, we can do that in the future as well, but we are limited in space if you have parking and everything else. There's been lots of talk and thoughts of doing this project, getting EV charging stations out there, which we want to do. The police department has had some interest in maybe some carports out there for their police vehicles, so they're not covered in snow and they can respond right away. And on those carports, maybe we could put some solar panels on those. Maybe some of the work we can work on the solar hot water that we have here at Town Hall. That is really, all of this stuff is starting to show its age. Building was 1983, I think, is when we built this and occupied it. 82.
Black on the wall. Saw it when I dropped off my ballots today.
So a year off, I apologize. Maybe we moved in 1983. Okay. So we'd like to just have a discussion with you and get your thoughts and ideas on this. And with that, I'm open to any questions, thoughts, or ideas.
Can we include this room as part of that redesign?
And if, I mean, what, yeah.
I mean, we're just, we have, the reason that came up is as Danelle was speaking, I'm looking at that table and I'm just looking at the whole, like, every time somebody or a group of people tries to come present, it's like, oh, come to the mic, do this, do that. You can't see, it just, everything about it's just old. And so if you're going to go out there and tear it all up out there, why don't we look at this room and that, making this more available to the hybrid format and to having the public in here, now that we've started to see more of the public here. So just a thought, if we're going to put the money into a design, we might as well look at everything.
Do that in the RFP.
Was at the same time, but
So that's a vote for option 3.
So option 3 plus chambers.
Okay, I can certainly look into that. I would think that $146,200 is more than enough to design what we want to design. I would hope. I mean, that's. Well, I noticed that we have some dying pine trees out there now too, that it looked like they have reached their lifespan, and it happens. So, and I know my crew would love to have a whole lot less maintenance anywhere we can get it, just because we're, a lot going on. So yes, it would.
If I don't ever lay claim to designing things. So I know, but I can see that this building screams 1983, inside and out. Has there ever been a space plan done? Meaning if we look at what we're using the building for, what should it look like? Even internally, are we functional? Like if we're going to have, it took us a long time to get to the police department space, and hopefully when it's done, it's going to be better by tenfold.
Right.
Is it time to look at how we're utilizing upstairs because it's so different than 1983.
Absolutely. It absolutely is time to look at the entire building, which would bring into the thought that we've had several times in the past of figuring out a way to expand office space into this atrium area while improving the existing office space, because as the folks that work in this building will tell you, some of that space up there is dysfunctional and maybe too big for what it is. Maybe the copy room takes up way too much space. That's a pretty big room. I don't know.
I don't either, and I don't claim to, but I know there's really smart people who do this for a living.
Yes.
The other thought is, I mean, to me, this building's 40-some years old. It's done. We've got a building catty corner that's about to be vacated and go for sale. Do we want to start thinking, okay, we don't have to shut down town hall if we buy across the street, build a building there, and then sell this one to offset the costs. But if we're gonna become functional, that to me is what option 4 is. If we're gonna enter the
Okay.
conversation, are we still putting lipstick on a pig by redoing the facade?
Well, and I can agree with that, Councilmember Aronson. However, you do have to take into account the cost of building a brand new building compared to maybe doing something within an existing footprint.
But I guess the question becomes, how dysfunctional is our space right now, and is it good enough? Or is
I think it
fixable?
could be fixed.
Okay.
I think the existing footprint of this building can be fixed based on what we've seen, what we've been able to do with the police department and that underutilized area over there. I think we have some underutilized area upstairs. I don't know. I don't work up there, so I can't speak to that too much, but I believe that we can create a really functional space within the footprint that we have. I'm all for building a new town hall if y'all would like to,
I don't
but
know, but that's why, that to me is where the study leads to is all of a sudden, a renovation of a certain magnitude, it becomes easier just to build a new building. Is that and I'm not advocating for that. I'm asking the question.
no, but we can
Is that
certainly,
something we should be putting on the table?
we can certainly put that in the RFP as a thought, analyze the situation to whoever gets the bid and say, what do you think about, the idea of a whole new town hall across the street? I can't answer to that right now. It seems to me that we could, instead of creating more footprint, we can really maximize the footprint that we have now.
Because also then they're all working at the police station.
And we had those
Not advocating for it. You asked us
Sure.
what else should be on the table. And I
That's
think when
option.
we walk
I
into
like
this
it.
conversation, we have it of a magnitude that we never have to have it again.
Right.
And that would be one of the options, is scrap it and move.
And I don't know how big that piece of land is there, and if we could get an equal size building to it. I mean, to me, this lot seems a little bit larger than that lot, but I don't know without looking at it. Because you're still gonna have parking, you're still gonna have to have all of those things that we have here. And I hate to say it, but even a redesign of the plaza can include one of the historic buildings that we're trying to find a home for. I don't know. We've talked about that, but yes, I did go there, Mr. Mayor. I apologize. But all options that need to be open when we're discussing this kind of thing, right? And we need to go in eyes wide open and think about what we want for the future, for another 40 years, basically.
And
if
I'll
you-
close out my thoughts of just, yes, this building is stale. It's not representative of who we are, or what we want to be. And so, yes, we need to move it up the priority list of let's do something to make people, our visitors and our locals, proud of the building that we live in.
Well, that's the way I kind of see it, is we've done so many improvements on other buildings, other areas, other facilities within the town, but we've kind of neglected the nerve center, if you will. And I think it's prime opportunity to do something with it and see what we can come up with.
I'll follow up and also go through the door you opened. I think I'd be kind of in support of that. option 3, but looking at the whole space, not just the atrium space.
Okay.
If we're doing it, let's do it. I agree. Let's do it right and make that investment. And I also think that for me also weighs into, that's an investment in staff. If we have the facilities that meet the needs and meet the work product that we've just saw come from our budget audit continuing to come out, I think that to me aligns in a lot of different ways that we should show. I do have to say, I was walking to the post office yesterday from here through the plaza, and while I hate to say it, I think maybe finding a way to put the Excelsior House and the Deming House and cabin or which is not the Deming cabin, sorry, what's the other one? that is a storage unit. The other
Mansfield Cabin.
Do
Thank you.
Mansfield's
Yes,
Cabin.
Mansfield Cabin.
And combine those two in a way that, is additional office space, becomes a part of this building, whatever it is in that courtyard area might make sense. And the longer they sit, the more they're going to fall harder to use in the future. And we could find a way to repurpose those. I'm all for it. I think it's a great place for it. But I think let's do it right. Let's do it right the first time. I hate to still spend $20,000 to replace the concrete. I don't know if we can just take all the nice planter boxes that we don't have from Main Street and spread them out in there and protect that whole area until it goes away. Or
As a Band-Aid, if you will, Mr. Mayor, Public Works could get in there and saw cut some of the really bad spots and just do some concrete work ourselves. This $20,000 that we do every year is usually contracted out. But I think we're getting to the point at Public Works, which was my desire all along, is to start trying to be able to do some of this stuff in-house and quit paying other people to do it when we can pay our own folks to do it. So we can certainly, make it safe and keep it clean, but all the Band-Aids in the world are eventually going to be, it's going to start looking weird out there, like a checkerboard, if you will, of different concrete slabs and everything else that I don't think that's what we want to look at. So.
It's like the whole thing. Let's make the plaza now safe and CERSA compliant, and trust your crew to make that happen and put that money to good use, which is making this building better. Any thoughts?
I love it. Well, no, I think it was like in the candidate forum when they had imaginary money, what would you do? And my answer was fix up town hall. So I'd be pumped to see what you guys could come up with, just as improvements. I like the carport ideas. I like the charging stations. I like the cabin ideas. Maybe we could make that a usable art space for artists or offices or daycare. I don't know, but I'm so excited. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.
Everybody good with that, director?
I'd agree. Remodel. We all thought it was pretty.
Post office.
Many millions of dollars. And, spending everything that we just have worked towards, for saving. I would imagine we could probably remodel this building for, a few million as opposed to getting up into the 10, 15 million.
I hope so. I want to be really clear, I'm not advocating.
No, for sure. So
Making sure we open our minds to all options.
I went first and didn't go there, but I'm with you.
on that front, what about building workforce housing over the concrete there?
Yeah.
You want me to throw it out? Go throw it.
I was thinking that too, like, is there a way we could,
Uh,
even if it's, I don't know, police housing, or whoever, like staff, I don't know. I guess we might have one.
the clock tower, we could turn into a small studio apartment, if you will.
It's not coming down based on the bids.
Well, yeah, and if you remember right, I looked at those today, the bids. The last two bids we received were right in the $40,000 range just to tear the clock tower down. It is a substantial structure. It's a steel skeleton underneath all of that brick and mortar. So it's at 40 grand just to tear that thing down. And then you have a space that, what do we do with it?
surfaces
Yeah.
are not a good idea.
Were you here when they built that?
No, oh God, no, oh, good Lord.
You said, earlier you said something like we built or we opened it or.
Well, we as a collective town, I
Okay,
was 12 years old when that thing was built. So no, sir, I was not here.
Original construction.
I was in military.
Yeah, make us all feel like that.
Great, if you want to jump in. The only thing I would say is because we've had to rework things in the past, the only ask I would have with RFP of the entire complex is scale.
Yes. We can do add alternates, okay, we want to know, we want to do this, but we want to know how much this is gonna cost. We know we want, yes, we
Or
can,
even feasible.
we can write the RFP to be any way we want. It could be, end up being a 3-year project, if that's what we wanted. It
That's
could,
what I'm exactly.
absolutely. I mean, we could do that. We could.
Usable space, we can't
Take
use
care of the outside first, get the outside done first, but I have it all as one big scope of a project. That way we know what we're dealing with. We know what kind of money we need to set aside for it, because I can't tell you right now with good faith. I mean, I could say, yeah, $5 million, we could do it, but I'm not gonna do that anymore because stuff is so volatile. I'm not coming up with numbers anymore.
But it seems like every time we do some, I'm sorry, Rick.
No, I'm good, I'm good.
Every time whether it's the marina, the PRA, we do a master plan.
Yeah.
We need a
Maybe
town
that's
hall,
what
we need a town hall master. plan.
Okay, that's what
That
we can.
allows us to explore the bigger picture ideas, just to make sure we're covered.
Maybe that's what the RFP asked for then.
Yep.
Instead of design or anything, why don't we talk about for step 1, town hall master plan?
Council good with that?
Yes.
That's fair. Let's, if we can, keep it, sustainable design in mind. Yeah, even beyond.
Yeah, let's sit right, just get the notebook down. Alright, anything else?
No, just to make sure you're aware that will require, should you take up option 3, it will require a budget amendment and likely negotiate money tree for us. So if you're willing to, if you want to do that, we will start the ball rolling and we will go out RFP for a town hall master plan. Excellent.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Next up is the amendments to our purchasing codes, and I know she's taking the notes. Plus, I just want to see what you think timing wise, if you want to do this while we eat, and if you're okay with doing this as a work session agenda item.
Do that?
Or do you council, do you think if you all read the report, do you have tons of questions, or should we get the staff report and roll? All right, we'll just keep
Okay.
going. Thank you.
So this, sorry, do you want to turn this off?
I'm trying to get you there and it's doing what it wants to do.
But this memo provided to you basically has 2 components. The first component is where it started, which was a desire for the town of Frisco to be able to take advantage of pricing at levels that's generally available to larger governments. There are cooperatives available to us where, there would be an RFP issued, there would be a selection process, and there would be a best vendor selected through that. And there would be great pricing, presumably that would be related to that proposal. And then we as a town could take advantage of that pricing that is likely better than the pricing we're getting right now under some of our RFPs. Additionally, the state is an option in there. State pricing would be available to us in agreement with our code. So an example of that is when we purchase police vehicles. State pricing is really the best option to purchase those Ford Interceptors. And then as we were updating the code and came up with that idea, it was brought up that there were some dollar amounts in there that hadn't been updated since 2007. So I would also propose to adjust those related to inflation and use a CPI calculator that was numbers as of May 2022. Those numbers could, change at any point in the near future again, but hopefully, we'll continue to update those at somewhat regular intervals as the need requires. Are there any questions I can answer? So just to clarify, we need to adjust our code in order to be able to take advantage of those procurement options?
Yeah, currently, what the code reads is for certain dollar amounts, we would be required to do our own RFP. And it did reference doing some shared purchasing, but it only referenced governments that are within Summit County. So it was fairly limited on the shared purchasing that we could do. It did not include state purchasing.
As to like. State is going for or something like that.
So generally the state purchasing is for a specific vehicle, but it wouldn't limit us over anything that we currently have. We always have the ability to go out and do our own proposal. I'm not suggesting that we change anything that we currently have the option for, just that we add these cooperatives as an additional option.
A recent example that I was able to take advantage of is EV charging. We got in Breckenridge got a grant from the state. And then instead of going out for this, 4, 5, 6, 8 week long procurement process, we were able to jump on the state's pricing and we're able to order right away. So it is really helpful.
That's a great. Thank you, Jesse.
So do you think this is something like we have I know some of our other code where it's written in that we just revisit it on a regular schedule of some sort to make sure we're keeping up with numbers? Is that something we should do or?
Add on as far as where that works in other places in the code, since
If
I'm
not,
not
I
as
just know
used to
like that
that.
gap of whatever 2007 to now is. Seems excessive, or we just know as staff,
I think they end up being traps for the unwary.
Okay.
When you set them in your code and then somebody forgets the deadline and then suddenly you're out of date and we need an
Let's not
ordinance
go
right
there.
away.
That idea. Otherwise, I'm in full support of all of this.
I can bring an ordinance back to you for the next meeting. Okay, thank you for your time.
To you on Thursday.
Well done. 4 minutes.
We'll be back at 7 o'clock. Thank you all. Oh, sure.
people. How great that whole project looks. I mean,
The
that's
Frisco one. He's
just-
asked me
it's
if
a
I see anybody
fantastic, Beautiful.
on David. Nope, nope, nope. don't
Really our
see.
entrance, really
That
beautifies way.
person.
So
Yeah.
commendations to you and to
clock. Are we ready to?
Yes, we are recording.
Our recorders, that's what I needed to hear. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Frisco Town Council. And at this time, I'd like to open up for public comment. Anyone wishing to do so, can do so now. Please state your name and your address for the record. Be topic specific for anything that's not on this evening's agenda. And keep your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. If you're online, you can raise your hand, unmute yourself, and I will call on you that way. But anyone willing to make public comment, please. Come on up to the lectern, please. So everybody can hear you in the microphone and yeah, that thing. So yeah. Thank you.
Hear me.
Yes.
My name is Gail Culp, 46 Granite Street, Frisco. I live south of Granite Street. And for years, some of our neighbors have been sending petitions, letters, going to meetings about the safety of Granite Street and the inability or the difficulty to cross as a pedestrian. And so I'm here to say that I'd like you to put safety first and perhaps make some steps towards making it safer. Right now, we don't have any crosswalks, and so the problem is on the road is not so much the speed of the vehicles or the volume of the vehicles, but that there are no crosswalks, so no vehicle will yield to you. We've had instances where kids have had near misses, and it's just not safe. And we have the consultants and studies and stuff going on, but we never see progress. So I'm just hoping that you would find a way to make it possible to have some interim steps to do something along Granite Street. There's also a couple other things like, we do have more trucks than necessary coming through the center of Frisco. And perhaps you could take the sign that's at 201 exit that says no trucks over 5 ton and make it bigger, or you could designate Summit Boulevard as a truck route, as a lot of cities do. What else? Let's see. Oh, we heard from staff that Granite Street has some designation by council to be a truck route or to be something other than a neighborhood street. And so maybe you could change whatever you call it. I don't know if that would make any difference or not. So anyway, I'd like to know if there's anything we can do to help, like you allowed Main Street to be painted by artists. Maybe we could go out with a bucket of paint and paint stripes on Granite Street. So I just ask for you to consider an interim step to make our street better.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, please come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, I'm Jim Preble, 10 Teller Street. I'm an occasional resident, which is to say I'm back and forth from the Front Range, but my daughter, and more importantly, my 12, now going on 13-year-old granddaughter live and have lived at 10 Teller Street for the past 3 years. And thus it's the safety of my granddaughter that I most want you to think about. She, along with many other children who are south of Granite, both use Granite as a safer route sometimes to bike on than Main Street because of the angle parking on Main Street and the traffic on Main Street and cars and trucks parked and back up right into a bicycle lane. And it's a decidedly dangerous street to bike on, to go east and west, as you must well know by your own observation. My granddaughter was nearly hit by a driver during the Frisco barbecue, had to literally throw herself off her bike into the gravel to avoid getting run over. So that's the concern we have. Now, we all participated, many of us, in the Safe Streets dialogue. I want to pay compliments to Don Reimer. Oh, made the mistake of mispronouncing his name, but that's because there's a little town in Minnesota named after him, but pronounced differently. And Susan Lee, who we met with last week and explained where you are in the process. And so what I understand is that, well, you've got a very elaborate plan, which we all participated in the charrette and the online and so on. It's not funded. and you're looking for grants and you're looking to, so I just urge you to, what you need to do while you're waiting to figure out the funding stream, which I understand public finance is challenging and, you know, it takes time and so on and so forth. We need a temporary interim solution to enhance the safety on Granite. So I know there's traffic studies that Don and Susan told us about that are going to take place for the next 6 weeks or a month or whatever. But even that will result in only perhaps creating one crosswalk and one additional, what they call paint and post, painting a crosswalk and putting up a vertical sign that says pedestrians have right of way. I implore you, you need to try to do something of a temporary nature during the busy tourism season, the next 3 months, probably till October 1st, because you have a dangerous situation on that street for all the reasons that you know. Lastly, with respect to truck traffic, both on Main Street and through town and diverted onto Granite, you can address that most quickly by being a stronger advocate with CDOT to change the signage out on I-70 that directs trucks traffic to exit 201 through Main Street, Frisco, rather than to the state highway at 203 and down and up Highway 9. Now, we were told by staff that there's kind of a deaf ear on the part of the regional CDOT people. Well, I'm sure many of you know our dear friend, our mutual friend, Julie McCluskey, chair of the Joint Budget Committee. A simple phone call to Julie that says, would you call Shoshana Lowe, head of CDOT, and get us a little attention here in this little town of Frisco to get the signage out on the interstate changed that directs big trucks for 18-wheelers to State Highway 9, exit 203, rather than directing them down the Main Street or Granite Street in Frisco, putting little children and, for that matter, old people like me at risk on a daily basis. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Come on up, yeah, we can just keep rolling.
I'm another one of the neighbors in that same area. I'm Samantha Toberman at 60 Teller Street. And I just want to say, please do something about Granite. And that's, I'll just defer to them. Thanks very much.
Hi, my name's Steve Forbes. I'm under contract at a house at 190 Galena Street. And I sent an email out previously. And I just want to make sure I start with, I'm here to compliment and to say thank you about what the meeting was like earlier about short-term rentals. I know when a cap goes in place, that resale value for me is going to go down a little bit. I'm okay with that because you're prioritizing the community and you're prioritizing workforce housing. And I'm all on board. In 5 years, my wife and I are going to be moving here full time. My kids are going to go to college and they're like, we'd rather come up here and visit you here than in the Front Range. So we're all excited about that. And I want to just say, I thought it was so well thought out, that work session. It was just wonderful. The only idea I wanted to bring up as far as, people to maybe engage are those that are under contract, because the last 2 weeks I was like, I don't know if you could tell by the email I sent out, I even called the mayor and I was like, I was sweating bullets. Like if I couldn't get a short-term rental for the short term, for the next 5 years, I would have either had to walk away from the deal and lose a lot of money or risk it and close. And then if I couldn't get a short-term rental license, have to resell it right away, and it would have financially ruined me. So based upon what we heard earlier in the work session, it seems like timing is going to be fine. But for others, and for people who are maybe looking to buy places from out of town, maybe not having a real reputable real estate agent, if you wanted to have a date where you're no longer exempt after a certain date, you got to apply or be under contract by a certain date, or you're going to be exposed to the new short-term rental cap, then it's clean and nobody can complain about it. Everybody knows about it, just as an idea, because the new idea of the talking about short-term rental rules changed after I was under contract. And I was like, I'm not going to sleep for the next month. But anyways, I love what you're doing. I support it all and I support it financially too. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else in chambers? Not, I will go to those joining us online.
If anybody wishes to make a public comment on something not on the tonight's schedule, please raise your hand.
Seeing no other public comment, I will close public comment, go to mayor and council comments. That should I reference the added agenda item at the end of the evening? Is it-
Sure, just for the audience online. that
Just for those, we have also added to this evening's agenda an additional executive session that we'll be calling after old business, which was not on the original posted agenda. So we'll take there. Any other mayor council comments? The Avalanche one, I think that's great. I'll leave it at that. Vanessa, any staff updates that weren't in the packet?
No staff updates. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Next up would be the consent agenda. Move to approve the consent agenda by the Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Burley. Any discussion on the motion? None. Question, please.
Certainly. Aronson,
Yes.
Burley. Held,
Yes.
Incan,
Yes.
Palenko.
Yeah.
Scripsack Adrian,
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next up is new business item number 1, and this is a new hotel and restaurant liquor license. Warren Concepts, Inc., doing business as Sugar Moon. I hereby call the public hearing to order. We are here this evening to conduct a public hearing for the consideration of a new hotel and restaurant liquor license application located at 121 East Main Street, Site A. The name of the applicant is Warren Concepts, Inc., doing business as Sugar Moon. All testimony will be under oath. The town clerk will swear in any and all making statements or asking questions other than the council members. We will now hear a staff report from the town clerk. Deborah, will you read?
Certainly. As prescribed by state statute, all new liquor license applications must first be submitted to the local licensing authority for review and approval. Supporting documentation as outlined on State Form DR 8404 must accompany the application to begin the hearing process. The preliminary findings were included to you during the last council packet. The application is for a new hotel and restaurant liquor license located at 121 East Main Street for Warren Concepts, doing business as Sugar Moon. It's the former log cabin. They have posted the paperwork at the building appropriately, and we have also posted it in the journal on June 17th. The applicant has submitted fingerprints with Identigo, the electronic digital fingerprinting company, and they have been found to be satisfactory.
Thank you very much. I will now hear any testimony from our police department, followed by questions for the applicants by council members.
Have done our NCIC, CCI check for the owners, and no problems at all.
At this time, Deborah, could we swear in applicant?
We certainly shall. Online, I can see several people who are involved with the application. I see Taryn and I see Kelly and I see Austin. We are looking for the person who circulated the petition to be prepared to do an oath. That they have submitted the petition. So I'm not sure who I'm speaking to on that one.
If you are not part of this proceeding,
My
at this moment, can you please?
I'm just
mute
listening to
yourself?
a council meeting. I know it's fun. I'm sorry. It'll just be a minute.
Whoever's speaking with someone, a friend of theirs maybe who's online, can you please mute yourself?
I think we've got
I
it.
think we got it. Apologies. Taryn and Austin.
Am I swearing you in or Taryn or both of you?
Sorry, my name's a little deceiving. I couldn't change it. This was from a prior hearing, the petitioning part of it. I'm actually counsel for Taryn and Sugar Moon, but Taryn's the one who circulated the petition with Tavish, I believe. So she'll be testifying to methodology and results.
Great. Thank you so much for the clarification.
Yeah, no
Taryn, if you can repeat after me. I, Taryn, insert your name.
I, Taryn,
Do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm,
under penalty of perjury,
under penalty of perjury,
that the testimony I'm about to provide
that the testimony I'm about to provide
is accurate to the best of my knowledge.
is accurate to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you, Taryn.
Thank you, Taryn. Welcome. Just wanted to take a moment to have anything you wanted to say on your behalf or about the liquor license or the endeavor you're about to take. And then our council will, legal counsel will have some questions for you as well.
Absolutely. I want to start by saying thank you guys for allowing me to be here tonight and to be a part of this amazing community. I've been a part of the Breckenridge community for 15 years and I love Frisco, spent a lot of time in Frisco. I'm excited to be able to bring this new restaurant to Main Street with the help of my CEO, Tavish. We're going to do a Kansas City barbecue restaurant. We really did want to keep the breakfast concept there. Unfortunately, with the way staffing is right now, it is a very difficult thing to staff morning hours. So after doing a lot of research and searching, we decided to do something that is near and dear to both mine and Tavish's heart, which is barbecue. My husband is from Kansas City. My stepkids still live in Kansas City. And so it's a way for me to bring a little bit of that to our home and to honor what we do with the barbecue challenge by having a barbecue restaurant on Main Street. I know we have Highside Brewing, but this is a completely dedicated to barbecue restaurant. And we just want to be able to give the community and the people who come to visit our wonderful community an easy and delicious place to enjoy our food. We are known in Breckenridge at my other restaurant for doing from scratch. And that is what we plan to do here as well, is to do as much from scratch as possible. We have been working very hard to develop recipes that we think you guys will really love and to create a space that honors what the previous space had already done and to continue with the historical part of it and to bring something amazing to the community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Hi, Taryn. This is Thad Renault, the town attorney. I think your counsel just told the board that you were the one who circulated the petition concerning the reasonable needs and desires of the neighborhood. Is that correct?
I did it with Tavish.
And can you tell the board just a little bit about how you went about circulating that petition?
Yeah, we started at Sugar Moons and walked to one end of the block or the street and then turned around and walked up to the other end of the street and ended at the Moose Jaw.
Super. And it was it the two of you together? Did you separate? Were you gathering individually?
We separated. So he did part of it and I did part of it so that we could cover more ground.
Super. In just a second, we'll swear him in and have the same questions for him. To the best of your knowledge, Taryn, was each person who signed that petition an adult, either an adult, 21-year-old or older, resident of the town, or the owner of a manager of a business within the town?
Yes, and we made sure to ask that to every person that signed.
Super, thank you. And the same question of Tavish, if we can get him sworn in.
Hi, Tavish, if you could unmute yourself, thank you. I'd like to swear you in, please. Please say aye, insert your name.
I, Tavish McMullen,
Do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
under penalty of perjury
under penalty of perjury
that the testimony I'm about to provide
that the testimony I'm about to provide
is accurate to the best of my knowledge.
is accurate to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you, Tavish.
Hi, Tavish, Thad Renault again, the town attorney. Just the same question. First is, was that an accurate description of your circulation of the petition?
Yeah, we
And-
basically,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. I was just saying, we went from one side to the other, back and forth, and split up to get it done as quickly as possible.
Super. And to the best of your knowledge, was each person who signed either an adult, 21 years of age or older, resident of the town, or the owner or manager of a business within the town?
Yes, and I'm pretty sure a couple of them, I personally made sure that wrote manager of the business they were at or owner.
Super. Thank you. I appreciate you going through that with me. There's some case law in Colorado that wants specific testimony on those issues, as your attorney is probably well aware. Thanks.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you both. At this time, I'd like to open it up. Are there any persons joining us this evening, in person or online, supporting this application? If you are online and you are here to speak in support, you can unmute yourself and raise your hand and I will call on you.
I am not seeing any raised hands.
No one wishing to speak in support. I will open it up now to see if there are any persons joining us this evening opposing this application. You also may come to the lectern or unmute yourself and raise your hand.
Not seeing any hands.
Seeing none, I will close that. Taryn or Tavish, any closing statements you'd like to make? Anything else that we need to know? I think you don't have to, just part of the question I have to ask.
No.
All right, sounds good. Then at this time, I will close this public hearing and turn it back over to council discussion and perhaps a motion. I just say, looking forward to having you guys bring life back to that building. I will miss the breakfast restaurant. I understand your thought process there and understand it. And hopefully we can be successful in getting more workforce housing, and then you can open up for breakfast as well in the near future. But otherwise, I wish you all best of luck and looking forward to having you in Frisco.
If somebody needs a copy of the motion, I have a paper copy that I can share.
Got it.
All your staff recommendations. is in
Yes.
there, correct?
Yes.
You good to go.
Any further
It's a long.
discussion or questions? Council on any of this? Great.
Mr. Mayor, I move to make a motion approving the issuance of a new hotel and restaurant liquor license for Warren Concepts Incorporated doing business at Sugar Moon, located at 121 East Main Street, Suite A, pending satisfactory FBI, CBI background checks on the basis of the following findings: that the authority, one, has reviewed the neighborhood under consideration and finds it to be the town of Frisco as a whole. Two, has considered the desires of the inhabitants of the neighborhood and finds that the inhabitants desire an additional establishment that serves liquor. Three, has reviewed the needs of the neighborhood for the outlet and finds that the needs of the neighborhood are not met by existing outlets. Four, has reviewed the location for the purpose of establishment and finds that is not located within 250 feet of any school or college campus. Five, has reviewed the qualifications of the applicant and personant. Yeah. Two, the requirements of the Frisco Code and Colorado statute, finds the applicant to be qualified to obtain a hotel and restaurant liquor license under the name of Warren Concepts, Inc., doing business as Sugar Moon.
Move to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Councilmember Held. Is there a discussion on the motion? Seeing none, if we call the question, please.
Certainly. Burley. Yes. Held.
Yes.
Incan.
Yes.
Palenko. Scripsack, Adrian.
Yes.
Martinson.
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Taryn. Tavish. Look forward to seeing you guys open the doors.
Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone.
Guys.
Next item on is agenda item number 2. This is under old business.
Apparently
This will be second reading of ordinance 22-07, an ordinance amending the code of ordinances of the town of Frisco, Colorado to establish fees for water bills issued on paper and for the filing of paper sales tax, lodging tax, and disposable bag fees, not freeze as said, by amending sections 124-8 concerning disposable bag fees, 160-2.3 concerning sales tax returns, 160-35 concerning lodging taxes, and 171-11 concerning water service charges. I'll open up the public hearing, turn it over to staff. Hello, Leslie and Hillary, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for reading that long title. Very much appreciated. So this is the second reading of an ordinance regarding fees for the generation of paper for different processes within the town. There has been one minor change since the first reading of this ordinance, which is to add the ability for the finance director to waive the fee in order to incentivize people to sign up for the online platforms. Are there any questions I can answer?
Questions for staff? I will open it up for public comment. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment on this section of the ordinance? Yes.
David Rolling, 123 Rose Crown Circle. Simple question. I pay my bills electronically. My bank mails a check. Will I end up paying $5 more to do it that way? As opposed to paying with a credit card online?
So,
My only question, I'll sit down while it's addressed, if it's addressed. Thank you.
so the fee that we're proposing is not based upon your method of payment. So paper checks would be fine. It would not be subject to the fee. It's based upon how you would receive, in the case of the utility bill, how you would receive your water bill. So if you receive your water bill electronically, then you would not be subject to the fee.
Thumbs up for the question. Anyone else wishing to make public comments?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Close public comment and turn it over to, whoever wanna jump in on bag fees. Where that is. Nothing else.
Nothing else to add, no.
Any other questions? Make sure I'll open up the public comment on that portion as well. None, close public comment, back to council discussion. And the motion only has to be for approving agenda item number 2. Scared of the reading part.
No, I just thank you for bringing this forward. It's not only is digitizing bringing us into the modern age, but it's, you know, it's addressing a small piece of what we can do from a sustainability perspective. And so hopefully this will have a trickle down effect to all the other departments and how we operate as an organization as well. And I know Hillary's got an eye for that. So thank you. With that, Mr. Mayor, I move we approve agenda item number 2.
Move to approve agenda item number 2 by Councilmember Burley. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Holenko. I think I heard her get that in first. Is there any discussion on the motion? It's the same person. Hearing none. Can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Held,
Yes.
Incan,
Yes.
Blanco,
Yes.
Scripsack Adrian,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very much. Next item this evening is the executive session.
Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pertinent to CRS 4-6-402 parentheses 4 parentheses tax personnel matters concerning town manager recruitment.
Executive session for Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Burley. Any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Certainly. Incan,
Yes.
Blanco, Scripsack Adrian,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley,
Yes.
Held.
Yes.
Thank you. I will be shutting down the regular meeting and we'll open up in Zoom in a separate one.
Do we know Linda upstairs still?
She is.
Great.
She was planning on watching. She was
Okay.
coming down.
Perfect.
I was not planning on staying unless you wanted me
I
to.
think we're good.
Great. Thank you.
Here's my water bottle.